Look, I'd start by echoing what others have said and condemning the completely outrageous actions by Russia, and the war in Ukraine has certainly shone a spotlight on food production, not just in this country but internationally, and we're only at the tip of the iceberg of this food crisis. And I know that officials are insisting that food availability is not at stake in the EU, but they are conceding that food affordability for low-income households is. So we're facing a situation where there will be enough food, it's just not that everyone will be able to afford to eat, and that's within the EU. And then when you look at the Global South, food availability will become a much bigger issue. And others have said here today that fertiliser price increases of up to 228% are in tandem with unsustainable increases in feed and energy prices and completely unsustainable costs for farmers who are operating in a distorted market where the dominance of retailers and processors mean that the primary producers are not getting a fair price at the best of times. And while it seems apparent from the European Commission that market supports will be made available, including the possibility of the use of the €500 million European Crisis Reserve Fund, and I know the government has announced a scheme for the pig sector, but that will only amount for a few days of feed for those farmers. So I think one thing is very clear on the backdrop of this war, as I said, and that is that our agricultural and food systems are very exposed to the shocks such as the price of gas, the increasing cost of fertilisers and the increasing cost of animal feed. Our food system is broken, and it's not a new phenomenon. It's something that agrarian movements have been raising for years. And as Senator Garvey has said, organics is one of the ways that we can absolutely reduce the vulnerability to spikes in the cost of inputs. But organic farming has been neglected by government policy. It shows we're at the bottom of the EU table. I think Malta is the only country that actually is lower than us in agricultural land that's dedicated to organic farming. Our figure is 2%. I think the EU average is 8.5%. So there's been a complete lack of ambition for years, and particularly under the 10 years of Fine Gael government, because in fact there was a point at which one couldn't even enter the scheme. Even if you wanted to be an organic farmer, you couldn't actually access the scheme because it was closed. So we now have, I believe, a target of, I think, 7.5% by 2030, but that won't even bring us up to the EU average. And meanwhile, you see that the EU is storming ahead. They're setting targets for 25% by 2030. So we're always hearing this narrative that, you know, Irish agriculture thrives on a sustainable green reputation. But the truth is that it's not true, and there is a complete lack of support for the truly green and sustainable agriculture, which is organic. And it undermines the reputation, but it also does nothing to support farmers who want to go into organics. And one of the proposals that has come from my colleague Matt Carthy is an additional €15 million for organics in 2022 alone. And there's a reason why other countries are storming ahead when it comes to organics, because Denmark, unlike what we have done in terms of the dairy industry, where we created a market, incentivised farmers to go down that road, Denmark did exactly the same with organics. They promised farmers a market. If you go into organics, you will have a market. And how they did that was they ensured that any supermarket over a certain square footage was mandated by law to actually stock the Danish organic products. And we could do exactly the same here if we had the same ambition when it comes to organics. You know, and Teagasc and Bord Bia should be resourced with ring-fenced funding to promote organic, create the market. You know you can do it because you did it in terms of the powdered milk and the dairy industry, so make the market for organics. But also the issues around global considerations I wanted to raise today and around sustainable agriculture and food systems, because before the war in Ukraine broke out, we're already facing the unprecedented challenge of pursuing human development and ensuring the right to adequate food for all on the planet. Because we waste 30% of our food. So it's a distribution problem we have, not a food shortage problem. And we need to find a way to feed what will be 9 billion people by 2050 in ways that don't breach essential ecological and planetary boundaries, while also tackling poverty and extreme inequality. And we must rise to those challenges with restricted deliveries of important foods like wheat and also agriculture-related commodities like fertiliser. And as I said, more than enough food is produced, but 811 million people go hungry. And since 2015, that number has been on the rise. And COVID-19 aggravated it, and now the war in Ukraine is going to make it even worse. And I've raised it before with you, Minister, just around one of the measures that Trócaire has been calling for, and its greater support for enabling environment for sustainable food systems through its agricultural investments, and that sectoral investments should be directed towards the sustainable approaches that an increasing scientific and practitioner evidence base is pointing decision makers through. The policy recommendations endorsed by Ireland on agroecological and other innovative approaches for sustainable agriculture and food systems that enhance food security and nutrition, it's a long title, recommend that governments redirect their policy budgets and investments towards those agroecological approaches. So I would call on the government to follow through on its endorsement of the recommendations of that agroecological report and make sure the resources are put in place that we can pursue an agroecological future and address the food production crisis that we have, because the war has just brought it into focus, but it's been there for a very, very long time. The way we produce food is unsustainable.